Welcome, dear listeners, to a tale where shadows crawl across the land and every creak of the floorboards is a whisper of something dark and unseen. Tonight, we embark on a journey through the crumbling remnants of a world besieged by terror and chaos. Our story unfolds in the heart of Atlanta, where the CDC stands as both a fortress and a beacon of hope amidst the apocalypse. Imagine the silence of a deserted city, the eerie stillness broken only by the distant groans of the infected. Picture a lone survivor, Jin Lee, fighting not just for his own life, but for the flickering ember of humanity's survival. In the midst of the ruins, a glimmer of hope emerges, but it comes with a price, a harrowing battle against both the grotesque beasts and the shadows of human treachery. As you immerse yourself in the chilling echoes of this story, let your imagination wander through the desolate streets, feel the weight of each heartbeat, and brace yourself for a journey where every corner hides a secret, and every whisper might be your last. This is not just a story of survival, it's a descent into the abyss where courage meets its ultimate test. Before we dive into the darkness, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the light of these tales burning, and it ensures that you'll be the first to hear the next chilling installment of our survival horror series. Now, turn off the lights, close the doors, and prepare yourself for a journey into the heart of darkness. Chapter 1: The Road. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked asphalt as Jin Lee drove cautiously down the abandoned highway. The road stretched endlessly before him, a lifeless ribbon cutting through the rural south, lined with rusted vehicles and overgrown weeds. The world had gone to hell, and every mile Jin traveled drove that reality deeper into his bones. He'd been on the road for days, moving in a state of constant vigilance, alone with his thoughts and the ever-present threat of danger. The last human encounter he'd had ended with a bullet grazing his shoulder, a reminder that in this new world, the living could be as deadly as the dead. Jin knew better than to trust anyone, but he also knew he couldn't afford to stay in one place for long. The zombies weren't the only predators out here. Jin glanced in the rearview mirror for what felt like the 100th time, scanning the road behind him. Nothing. Just the empty stretch of blacktop and the husks of long-abandoned cars. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and eased his grip on the steering wheel, though the tension in his shoulders never fully dissipated. The knot of fear in his stomach had become a constant companion, one that tightened every time he rounded a bend or passed through a small, deserted town. The low growl of the engine was the only sound in the oppressive silence, and even that seemed too loud. Jin knew the rules. Keep quiet, keep moving, and avoid trouble at all costs. But trouble had a way of finding you when you least expected it. He was just starting to relax when a sudden loud bang echoed through the air. Jin's heart leaped into his throat as he slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. His pulse raced as he frantically scanned his surroundings, trying to locate the source of the noise. And then he saw them. Figures emerging from the tree line, rifles raised, their faces obscured by dirt and bandanas. The McLeans. Jin cursed under his breath, fear flooding his veins. He'd heard stories about them, a notorious group of raiders who controlled this stretch of highway, preying on anyone foolish enough to cross their path. He had hoped to slip through unnoticed, but it seemed his luck had run out. "Get out of the car," one of the raiders barked, his voice harsh and commanding. Jin's mind raced, weighing his options. There were at least 5 of them, all armed and looking like they knew how to handle themselves. Running wasn't an option, and fighting was suicide. He had no choice but to comply. Slowly, Jin opened the car door and stepped out, raising his hands in surrender. The raiders surrounded him, their eyes cold and predatory. One of them, a tall man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, stepped forward and shoved Jin against the side of the car. "Thought you could sneak through our territory, huh?" The man sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You're either really brave or really stupid." Jin remained silent, his heart pounding in his chest. The man patted him down, roughly searching him for anything of value, before yanking Jin's backpack off his shoulder and tossing it to one of the other raiders. "Not much in here," the raider said, rifling through the contents. "Just some food, notebooks, and a recorder." "Notebooks?" Scarface repeated, his lip curling in disdain. What are you, some kind of writer? Journalist, Jin replied, forcing the word out past the lump of fear in his throat. Journalist, Scarface mocked, a cruel grin spreading across his face. Well, you're about to make the headlines yourself, buddy. Last mistake you'll ever make. The other raiders chuckled darkly, and Jin felt a cold dread settle in his gut. This was it. He had survived the outbreak, the chaos, and the horror, only to be killed by a group of thugs on a deserted highway. The irony wasn't lost on him. But just as Scarface raised his rifle, ready to pull the trigger, something unexpected happened. A low, guttural growl filled the air, sending a chill down Jin's spine. The raiders froze, their eyes widening in alarm as they turned toward the source of the noise. The growl grew louder, more menacing, and then they saw them. Zombies, dozens of them, shambling out of the woods, drawn by the noise and the scent of fresh prey. Shit, fall back, Scarface yelled, his bravado evaporating as panic set in. The raiders scrambled, firing wildly at the approaching horde. But it was clear they were outnumbered. Jin didn't waste any time. In the chaos, he ducked low and started to crawl away from the car, his heart racing. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away from the raiders and the zombies fast. He was almost to the tree line when a hand grabbed his arm, pulling him up with surprising strength. Jin gasped, expecting to see one of the raiders, but instead he found himself staring into the eyes of a woman, her face smeared with dirt and blood. "Come on," she hissed, dragging him into the cover of the trees. "We don't have much time." Jin didn't argue. He let her lead him through the dense underbrush, glancing back just in time to see the zombies overwhelm the raiders, their screams filling the air as they were torn apart. The sight was horrifying, but Jin couldn't afford to stop. Survival was all that mattered now. They ran through the woods, the sounds of gunfire and screams fading behind them as they pushed deeper into the forest. Jin's lungs burned, and his legs felt like lead, but he kept going, driven by sheer adrenaline. The woman didn't slow down until they reached a small clearing, where two other figures, a man and a teenage girl, were waiting. "We got him, Dad," the woman said breathlessly, releasing Jin's arm. The man, tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair, nodded grimly. "Good, we need to move quickly before more of those things show up." Jin leaned against a tree, trying to catch his breath. "Who are you?" "Name's Clifford Reynolds," the man said, his voice deep and steady. "This is my daughter Melissa, and that's my wife June. You're lucky we found you when we did." Jin nodded, still in shock from the close call. "Thank you, you saved my life." "We're all just trying to survive," June said softly, her eyes filled with a weary kindness. "Come on. We have a place nearby where it's safe. You can rest there." Jin followed them, too exhausted to question his good fortune. They led him through the trees until they reached a small cabin, hidden among the thick foliage. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, and right now, that was all Jin could ask for. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, dark world outside. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of something cooking filled the air. Jin's stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten in hours. "Sit down," June said, motioning to a worn couch near the fire. "You look like you could use a meal." Jin sank into the couch, his body finally relaxing as the adrenaline wore off. He watched as June ladled out bowls of stew, handing one to each of them. The warmth of the food was comforting, a small reminder of what life used to be like. As they ate in silence, Jin found his thoughts drifting. He was alive. Against all odds, he had made it through another day. But the world outside was still falling apart. And he knew that this temporary refuge wouldn't last forever. He was a journalist, a witness to the end of the world, and there were still stories to be told, even if they were only for history's sake. For now, though, he would rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, he was safe, and that was enough. Chapter 2. Clifford's Story. The morning light filtered through the cabin's small windows, casting a warm glow over the rough wooden interior. Jin sat at the worn kitchen table, the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filling the air. It was a small comfort, a taste of the old world that seemed almost foreign now. Across from him, Clifford Reynolds and his family moved about with a practiced ease, as if trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy despite the chaos that had engulfed the world outside. June set a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon in front of Jin, smiling softly. "Eat up. It's not much, but it'll keep you going." "Thank you," Jin replied, grateful for the meal. He hadn't had a decent breakfast in weeks, and the sight of real food, cooked on a stove and served at a table, was enough to bring a lump to his throat. Melissa, the teenage daughter, sat down next to him, her eyes bright with curiosity. "So, you're a journalist?" she asked between bites of toast. Jin nodded, swallowing a mouthful of eggs. "Yeah, I am. I've been trying to document everything that's happened since the outbreak, recording stories of survivors, keeping a record of it all." Clifford, seated at the head of the table, looked at Jin with a mix of respect and skepticism. "That's a dangerous job these days. Most folks are just trying to stay alive." "I know," Jin said, meeting Clifford's gaze, "but I think it's important. If there's ever going to be a future, people need to know what happened, how we got here." Clifford nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I suppose you're right. Someone's got to tell the story." Jin took a sip of coffee, savoring the warmth. "Where were you when it all started, Clifford? What happened that day?" Clifford leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as he stared out the window. "I was on the road, heading home from a job. I'm a truck driver, been one for most of my life. I was out in the middle of nowhere, just me and the highway, when everything went to hell." Jin reached into his bag and pulled out his recorder, setting it on the table between them. "Do you mind if I record this?" Clifford looked at the recorder for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead, might as well get it all down." Jin pressed the record button, the small device emitting a soft click as it began capturing Clifford's story. And so, dear listeners, we draw the curtain on tonight's chilling episode. Jin Lee has found temporary refuge, but the road ahead is fraught with peril, and the shadows of humanity loom large. With every heartbeat, the danger grows, and the line between friend and foe becomes increasingly blurred. What challenges await Jin and his new companions? Will they uncover the dark secrets hidden within the ruins of Atlanta? Or will the shadows consume them whole? One thing is for certain: the fight for survival is far from over. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the lights flickering on these tales of terror, ensuring you're the first to experience the next installment. So don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join us again for the next episode, where fear and survival intertwine in ways you never imagined. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your heart steady, and your minds sharp, for the darkness is always watching.